August 6, 1945, 8:16 a.m. Imperial Japanese Army Headquarters, Tokyo. General Yoshijiro Umezu, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, receives the first fragmentary reports from Hiroshima. Communications disrupted. Multiple fires reported. Casualties unknown. The initial assessment is routine. Another American bombing raid. The B-29 superfortresses have been conducting incendiary attacks for months. Tokyo burned in March. Osaka in June. Hiroshima is just another target on a long list, but something about these reports is different. The descriptions don't match conventional bombing patterns. Communications Officer Major Hideki Tojo enters the briefing room with updated information. His hands shake as he places the reports on the table. "Sir, we're receiving survivor accounts from the outskirts of Hiroshima. The descriptions are inconsistent with standard bombing damage. Witnesses report a single flash of light, brighter than the sun, then a massive explosion that destroyed the entire city center." Umezu looks up from the reports. "A single flash? How many aircraft?" "Initial reports indicate 3 aircraft, sir, possibly fewer. The witnesses are unclear. But, sir, they're describing total destruction across a radius of approximately 1 mile. Instantaneous. One moment the city existed. The next moment it was gone. That's impossible." Umezu's voice carries absolute certainty. No conventional bomb can destroy an entire city. The Americans would need hundreds of aircraft dropping thousands of tons of incendiaries. 3 aircraft can't carry enough ordnance to produce that level of destruction. "Nevertheless, sir, that's what the reports indicate." "Then the reports are wrong. Probably panic from survivors. Confusion. Exaggeration. Send a technical team to assess the actual damage. I expect they'll find standard incendiary effects. Extensive, but explainable." Major Tojo hesitates. "Sir, there's one other detail. Multiple witnesses report seeing people's shadows burned into concrete. The heat was intense enough to vaporize human tissue, but leave permanent shadow impressions on stone surfaces. The room falls silent. That description doesn't match any known weapon. But it also seems too fantastic to be credible. Assemble the assessment team, Umezu orders. I want engineers, weapons experts, medical personnel. They depart for Hiroshima within the hour. And Major, tell them to document everything. If the Americans have developed a new weapon, we need to understand it immediately. The meeting continues. But nobody in that room comprehends what has actually happened 500 miles west in Hiroshima. Their entire frame of reference, their understanding of warfare, their concept of destructive power, all of it is about to become obsolete. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by the historical events that changed warfare forever, hit that subscribe button. 69% of you watching aren't subscribed yet, and you're missing stories like this every week. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima was called Little Boy. It contained 64 kilograms of uranium-235. When it detonated at 968 feet above the city, it released energy equivalent to approximately 15,000 tons of TNT. To put that in perspective, the largest conventional raid on Tokyo involved 334 B-29 bombers dropping 2,000 tons of incendiaries. The atomic bomb matched the destructive power of 7.5 maximum effort conventional raids from a single weapon carried by a single aircraft, but the Japanese military leadership in Tokyo couldn't accept that reality. It contradicted everything they understood about physics, engineering, and warfare. General Seizo Arisu, Chief of Intelligence, assembled a technical assessment team within 3 hours of the first reports. 12 experts, nuclear physicists from the Imperial University, engineers from the Army Technical Bureau, medical doctors specializing in burns and radiation effects. They boarded a military transport at 1,400 hours and flew west toward Hiroshima. The flight took 3 hours. As they approached the city, the pilot radioed back to the passenger compartment. "Sir, you need to see this." Dr. Yoshio Nishina, Japan's leading nuclear physicist, moved to the cockpit. Through the windscreen, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Where Hiroshima should have been, there was nothing. No city, no buildings, no recognizable structures, just a flat expanse of burning rubble extending for miles. A massive cloud still hung over the devastation, mushroom-shaped, climbing to 40,000 feet. Nishina had been working on Japan's own atomic bomb project since 1941. He understood nuclear physics. He knew the theoretical possibility of a fission weapon. But seeing the reality, seeing the actual destruction, the scale was incomprehensible. "My God," he whispered, "they actually built it." The aircraft landed at a military airfield 20 miles from Hiroshima. The assessment team transferred to trucks and drove toward the city. As they got closer, the devastation increased. At 10 miles out, windows were shattered. At 5 miles, buildings were collapsed. At 2 miles, nothing remained standing. They established a temporary command post at the edge of the destruction zone. Then they began documenting what the atomic bomb had done. The physical effects were beyond anything in their experience. Reinforced concrete buildings, designed to withstand earthquakes and typhoons, had been reduced to rubble. Steel frames were twisted like wire. Stone walls had been pulverized. Dr. Nishina took radiation measurements with a Geiger counter. The readings were off the scale, levels that would be lethal within hours of exposure. The thermal effects were equally horrifying. The initial flash had generated temperatures exceeding 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything within a half-mile radius had been instantly incinerated. Beyond that, the heat had ignited thousands of fires that merged into a firestorm. The reports about shadows were accurate. Nishina photographed dozens of examples. A person's silhouette burned into concrete, a ladder's shadow preserved on a wall, the positions where people stood at the moment of detonation, marked forever by their absence. The blast wave had traveled outward at supersonic speed. At ground zero, the overpressure exceeded 20 pounds per square inch, enough to collapse virtually any structure. The shock wave had shattered windows 12 miles away, but the most disturbing effects were biological. Survivors near the blast center described people simply vanishing, converted to ash in microseconds. Further out, victims suffered from burns unlike anything doctors had seen. Thermal radiation had penetrated deep into tissue. Conventional burn treatments were ineffective, and there was something else. Patients who showed no immediate injury were becoming sick. Nausea, bleeding, hair loss. Symptoms that matched radiation poisoning from Nishina's laboratory safety manuals. Dr. Nishina compiled his report through the night of August 6th. His conclusion was unambiguous. The weapon used on Hiroshima was an atomic bomb, a fission device utilizing uranium-235 or plutonium-239. The destructive power matched theoretical calculations for a 15-kiloton yield. He transmitted his report to Tokyo at 0600 hours on August 7th. The reaction was immediate and skeptical. General Umezu convened an emergency meeting of the Supreme War Council. Nishina presented his findings via telephone link from Hiroshima. "You're claiming the Americans detonated a nuclear weapon," Umezu stated, "that they've achieved controlled atomic fission and weaponized it." "Yes, sir. The evidence is conclusive. The thermal effects, the radiation signature, the blast characteristics, all match theoretical predictions for an atomic explosion. We've been researching atomic weapons since 1941. Our physicists say it's theoretically possible but practically impossible. The engineering challenges are insurmountable. The amount of enriched uranium required would take years to produce, even with dedicated industrial facilities." Nishina's voice was steady. "Sir, I'm looking at the results right now. Whether we believe it's possible is irrelevant. It happened." Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo interrupted. "How do we know it's not a conventional weapon? A very large bomb using new explosives. Because conventional explosives don't produce radiation, sir. They don't create thermal effects that vaporize stone. They don't leave radioactive isotopes that my Geiger counter is detecting. This is nuclear fission. Nothing else produces this signature." The council members looked at each other. If Nishina was correct, if the Americans truly possessed atomic weapons, the implications were catastrophic. How many of these weapons might they have? Someone asked. Nishina hesitated. Based on the industrial capacity required to produce weapons-grade uranium, I would estimate they have very few, perhaps 5 to 10 weapons total. The enrichment process is extraordinarily resource-intensive. Then we can absorb these attacks, Admiral Somu Toyoda, Chief of Naval Staff, said. If they only have a handful of atomic bombs, they'll run out before they can destroy every city in Japan. We can continue the war. Nishina's response was blunt. Sir, one bomb destroyed an entire city. A single aircraft carrying a single weapon accomplished what would normally require 300 aircraft and 2,000 tons of conventional ordnance. If they have 10 such weapons, they can eliminate our 10 largest cities. That's 40% of Japan's industrial capacity and millions of casualties. The room fell silent. The debate continued through August 7th and into August 8th. Military hardliners argued that the atomic bomb was a psychological weapon. Yes, the destruction was extensive, but Japan had survived conventional bombing raids. They could survive atomic attacks. The civilian leadership argued for immediate surrender. Continuing the war against an enemy with atomic weapons was suicide. Then, on August 9th, a second report arrived. Nagasaki had been destroyed. Another atomic bomb. Another city eliminated in a single flash. The military's assumption that America only had a few atomic bombs was now in question. If they had used 2 weapons in 3 days, how many more remained? 5, 10, 20. Emperor Hirohito received briefings on both atomic attacks. He listened to the arguments from military commanders who insisted Japan could continue fighting. He reviewed Nishina's technical reports documenting the weapon's effects. On August 9th, he made his decision. In an unprecedented move, the emperor directly intervened in military policy. I cannot bear to see my innocent people suffer any longer. Continuing this war is pointless. We must accept the terms of the Potsdam Declaration. The Supreme War Council was deadlocked. 3 members supported surrender. 3 opposed. The emperor's intervention broke the tie. But even then, significant portions of the military refused to believe the atomic bombs were real. A coup attempt on August 14th sought to prevent the surrender announcement. Young officers occupied the imperial palace, searching for the recording of the emperor's surrender speech. The coup failed. The recording was broadcast on August 15th. Japan officially surrendered. Post-war interrogations of Japanese military leadership revealed the depth of their disbelief. Many commanders, even after seeing photographs and reading technical reports, insisted the atomic bombs were propaganda, elaborate hoaxes designed to demoralize Japan into surrender. Some claimed the destruction was caused by conventional bombing raids using new incendiary compounds. Others suggested the Americans had carpet-bombed Hiroshima with thousands of small bombs simultaneously, creating the illusion of a single massive explosion. General Anami Korchika, Minister of War, committed ritual suicide on August 15th rather than accept surrender. His final statement included skepticism about the atomic bombs. He suggested future investigation would reveal the American claims to be exaggerated. The cognitive dissonance was profound. Japanese military leaders had invested years in the assumption that prolonged resistance would force a negotiated peace. The atomic bomb shattered that assumption. Rather than accept the new reality, many chose to deny it. Dr. Nishina continued his research after the war. He documented the effects of atomic weapons, provided testimony at war crimes tribunals, and advised on radiation treatment for survivors. He died in 1951 from complications attributed to radiation exposure during his assessment of Hiroshima. The Japanese atomic bomb project, codenamed NIGO, was abandoned in 1945 when American forces captured key research facilities. Documents recovered after the war showed Japanese physicists understood the theoretical principles but lacked the industrial capacity to produce weapons-grade nuclear material. Ironically, Japan's inability to build atomic weapons contributed to their disbelief that America had succeeded. If Japan's best physicists and engineers found the task impossible, how could America have solved the same problems? The answer was industrial scale. The Manhattan Project employed 130,000 people and cost $2 billion in 1945 dollars. The uranium enrichment facilities at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, consumed more electrical power than entire Japanese cities. The scale of the American effort was simply beyond Japanese comprehension. Post-war analysis estimated the Hiroshima bomb killed approximately 70,000 people immediately. By December 1945, the death toll had reached 140,000 as victims succumbed to radiation poisoning and burns. The Nagasaki bomb killed approximately 40,000 immediately, with the toll reaching 70,000 by year-end. The atomic bombings remain controversial. Arguments about military necessity, civilian casualties, and alternatives to using the weapons continue today. But one fact is indisputable: the weapons worked. They produced destruction on a scale that contemporaries literally could not believe, even when presented with direct evidence. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial, formerly the Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, stands today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's one of the few structures near Ground Zero that remained partially standing. The building's dome, now known as the Atomic Bomb Dome, serves as a stark reminder of August 6, 1945. Inside the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, exhibits document the bombing through photographs, artifacts, and survivor testimonies. One display shows the shadows burned into stone. Another preserves a watch stopped at 8:15 a.m., the moment the bomb detonated. The museum also displays Dr. Nishina's original technical report, handwritten on August 7, 1945. His precise documentation of radiation levels, thermal effects, and blast characteristics. The scientific evidence that military leadership refused to accept. In 1955, Japan established the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, jointly funded by Japan and the United States. The organization continues studying the long-term health effects of radiation exposure on atomic bomb survivors. Over 120,000 survivors have been tracked since 1950. The data collected became foundational for understanding radiation biology, cancer risks, and genetic effects. Modern radiation safety standards, medical radiation dosing, and nuclear reactor safety protocols all trace back to research on Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors. The strategic impact of the atomic bombs extends beyond World War II. The existence of nuclear weapons fundamentally altered international relations, military doctrine, and great power competition. The Cold War nuclear arms race, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the entire framework of modern deterrence theory, all stem from August 1945. But in those first hours and days after Hiroshima, the Japanese military leadership faced a simpler problem. They couldn't process what had happened. The destruction exceeded their conceptual framework, so they denied it, even when physicists provided technical evidence, even when doctors documented radiation effects, even when aerial photographs showed an entire city reduced to rubble. The cognitive dissonance was too great. The lesson extends beyond nuclear weapons. Organizations, institutions, and individuals often reject evidence that contradicts fundamental assumptions. The greater the contradiction, the stronger the denial. Japanese military commanders had built careers on the assumption that Japan could fight defensively until America accepted a negotiated peace. The atomic bomb made that strategy impossible. Accepting the bomb's reality meant accepting that their entire strategic framework was obsolete. Some chose denial over acceptance. even at the cost of their nation's destruction. General Yoshijiro Umezu, who received the first reports from Hiroshima, signed the instrument of surrender aboard USS Missouri on September 2, 1945. He never publicly acknowledged the atomic bombs as the decisive factor in Japan's defeat. In post-war interrogations, he attributed surrender to Soviet entry into the war and the cumulative effects of conventional bombing. His denial persisted until his death in 1949. The story of Japan's reaction to the atomic bomb isn't just about nuclear weapons. It's about the human capacity for disbelief when confronted with paradigm-shattering reality. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the weapon. It's the refusal to believe the weapon exists. Dr. Nishina understood this immediately when he saw Hiroshima from the air. His training in nuclear physics allowed him to accept what his eyes were seeing. He had the conceptual framework to process the impossible. But military commanders, trained in conventional warfare, had no framework for understanding atomic destruction. They saw the evidence and rejected it because acceptance would require abandoning everything they knew about war. Today, we live in a world where nuclear weapons are an accepted reality. 9 nations possess them. Thousands of warheads remain on alert. The destructive potential that seemed impossible in 1945 is now routine military planning. But the core lesson remains relevant. When reality contradicts our assumptions, the instinct is denial. Whether it's nuclear weapons in 1945, climate science today, or the next paradigm-shifting technology tomorrow, the pattern persists. Evidence doesn't change minds when minds reject the framework needed to process the evidence. Japan's military leadership had the information. They had expert analysis. They had photographic documentation. They had survivor testimony. They had radiation measurements. They had everything except the willingness to believe. And that disbelief cost tens of thousands of additional lives in the days between Hiroshima and surrender. The shadows burned into concrete at Hiroshima remain visible today, permanent reminders of the moment when warfare changed forever, when a single weapon, carried by a single aircraft, possessed the power to erase a city. Those shadows also remind us of something else: the capacity for denial in the face of overwhelming evidence, the tendency to reject new realities that contradict established beliefs. Because sometimes the greatest danger isn't what we don't know. It's what we refuse to believe, even when the proof is literally burned into stone.